Hi, my name's Rob O'Byrne, and let me continue with this journey of understanding outsourcing. This time we're going to talk about selection. Where do you find your virtual assistants and how do you go about the selection process? So I mentioned in the last video that there's really two main sources, or main sort of working modes, if you like. There are home-based virtual assistants and office-based. So let's start off with the home-based. All of this sourcing can actually take place online. So if you're trying to find individual virtual assistants, a number of sites that you might want to look at, there is one called Upwork, which used to be called Elance. This is a really good place. I have found very specific technical skills on there, sort of designers and proofreaders and people like that. That's really good. There is another well-known one called Fiverr with 2 R's. It's called that because when it started, all of the jobs on there you paid $5 for. It's a little bit more now. They call them gigs, and you might pay $10 for a gig or $15 for a gig, so it tends to be multiples of $5. Another one, if you're looking in the Philippines, is called Online Jobs. So amongst those sites and lots more, you will find dozens and hundreds of virtual assistants and professionals around the world who are happy to do work for you remotely. A lot of these sites will provide kind of one-off tasks, and I think they're very good for that. If you're looking for somebody to do something as a one-off, these are great places to go. With Online Jobs in the Philippines, you'll also find people who want more permanent work. That's what I tend to do. I've actually had people from these sites work with me, and now to the extent that they're actually full-time with me. But most of my staff, as you'll find out in a later video, are actually based in my own office in the Philippines. So this is the home-based. That's how you can source them. With the office-based, so if you just go and Google for virtual assistants or virtual assistants, or also look at BPO. This is business process outsourcing. So in the industry, they're known as BPOs. If you've ever driven around the outskirts of Mumbai or Cebu in the Philippines, there's huge tower blocks full of BPOs. Those two are places of really the hubs of the outsourcing industry. This is the alternatives. You have the home-based one, just working for you, the BPO, where there's hundreds or even thousands of them in a building, in a call center, if you want to call it, working away, all with different clients. So that's basically how you source them. The next question is part-time or full-time, and this is an interesting question. If you've just got some one-off tasks to be done, you might go to one of these websites and just allocate the task out. I'll just give you a tip if you're doing that. I've had some quite detailed work done with contractors through these sites. It's not always easy to find a good one. It can be time consuming, it can be a bit of trial and error. If I've got something urgent that I want done, I'll often hire 2 or 3 for the same task, and I'll just use the output from the best one. I know that sounds a bit awful, a bit mercenary, but I've been caught out too many times whereby I needed something done urgently, and the task came back a couple of days later and it just wasn't quite what I was looking for. So you can do your reference checks, you can look at samples of work, but ultimately, unless you've worked with that person a bit, you're not always going to get a fantastic result. Having said that, I've hired maybe 2 or 3 people to do the same task. I've then used the work from the best one, and then I have an ongoing relationship with that best one, some of whom have been going on for years. So it's a good way to sort of test out new people, I suppose. So that's where you can source those for one-off jobs. You can also source people here for working full-time with you, as you can with the BPO. We were talking about part-time and full-time. Part-time, this is really good. If you have tasks that are going to be ongoing, supporting tasks in your business, maybe it's handling email, handling your diary for appointments, regular jobs going on and on, they're not one-off, then I would go for a full-time person. Some people start with a part-time, maybe 4 hours a day or 2 days a week or whatever. I would actually go full-time right from the start. If you think that you can at least keep them 50% busy, I would go full-time. And I'll explain the reason for that right now. That is because once you're getting into outsourcing, if you're new to outsourcing, you're going to start off wondering what to give them. And there might be 2 or 3 key tasks that you've hired them for, and that's great. As they start working with you, you're going to think of other tasks. And, oh, by the way, can you do this? Oh, could you do this? And their task list is going to grow. So even if you hire them part-time, they're going to have to become full-time very quickly. If you haven't hired them full-time at the outset, they may not be available full-time. They may have other clients. You've got them for 50% of their time. Maybe they have another client. And so you can't get them full-time. So if you think at least you can employ them for 50% of the time, go full-time, you will find so much that you want them to do anyway. I started off with 1. I now have 8. So that's kind of how it grows. 8 just supporting me. Not supporting my business, there are others. 8 just support me. Just start off with full-time. You'll soon be so in love with the whole concept, they'll be doing half your work for you. Really, really is good. Okay, now let's talk about the actual selection process. I've had some great luck with this and some not so good luck. So let me give you some tips so that you don't have to make the same mistakes. As in hiring anybody for your team, whether you're doing it in your local country, local town, for your office, take great care in the selection process. This person, hopefully, is going to be with you for years and an integral part of your team. So, approach it with that in mind. So the first thing I would suggest is that you're going to interview 2 or 3 different people. I tend to do this on video Skype, so I get the CVs. I'll interview them sort of in the same day, one after the other maybe. I'll have some key questions about their work. I want to see examples of their work. But more so, and I always do a video Skype chat, I just want to have a chat with them and I want to see what makes them tick, and I want to get a sense of their values and their work ethic. And I'll talk about the relationship with your VAs in a later video, but this is the time to really see if you're going to click with them. My very first VA was a personal assistant, and I recognized that for this working relationship to work really well, I had to be totally comfortable with that person and that person with me. And I had to try and get a sense that this was going to be a very open, honest relationship. It was going to be, a very trusting relationship. It's very hard to tell up front, but, think about that during the interview. So don't just ask technical questions. Find out a bit about what makes them tick. Ask about their family. Those sorts of things perhaps in your own country you're not allowed to ask because of political correctness. For whoever you're talking to on the other end of the Skype chat probably won't mind. So see what makes them tick. And interview 2 or 3. A couple of times, and I've told my staff this later and they laughed about it, what I've often done is I've had someone sitting kind of off camera at my end, and in fact my wife did it the first time around. So I was interviewing 3 staff and she was sitting next to the computer so she could see the screen but wasn't on screen, and then we would talk about each one, and she provided some input into who she thought would be the best candidate. I've often done that, to be honest, just had someone sitting in the room so I could ask them later, what did you think? Was the English okay? Do you think they're confident enough? Whatever that might be. Okay, next thing then is to check references. Not always easy, particularly remotely. They're not going to give you bad ones. But maybe you can dig around and find out where they were working, what sort of work they were doing, even if you can't talk to the people that they were working with. I would then suggest that you have a trial period. And I normally do 3 months. So I'll say, you know, we're going to work together under this sort of payment arrangement, and I'll talk about that in a later video. We'll work for 3 months. My expectation is this, and if all goes well, you know, we'll be together forever, kind of thing. Very often I will do specific tests. I hope you're starting to see that this is quite an important decision for you. These are going to be key members of your team. With all of my staff now, I do personality profile tests. We've all seen those in big corporates. There's a particular one that I like to use, so I get them to do that as well. It's not a pass-fail test. It just gives me an indication of their personality type and their working style, and it helps me understand what role they'll be best suited for. Obviously, you're going to talk to them about salary, their expectations there, and again, I'll talk about that precisely in a following video. And then I would go away and check the rates. So if they're saying, for example, okay, I'll be your virtual assistant for 20,000 pesos a month, depending when you're watching this video, that's maybe a lot more than that now. I would then go onto one of these sites, maybe particularly online jobs, and look to see what the sort of going rate is. Is that high? Is that average? Just to make sure that, you know, it's a fair market rate. And again, I'll talk about the rate in a later video, but you want to make sure on the first hand that you're not kind of being ripped off and overcharged. I don't think that happens much. You want to make sure that it's a fair market rate. And also, I always think that people's income expectations give you a little bit of an insight into the quality of their work and their track record and their experience. Because obviously someone who's very confident and has done lots of similar work in the past will value themselves a little bit higher. So those are the sorts of things that I would look at in terms of the selection. Okay, so we've gone through how to source virtual assistants. We've got a few websites. We talked about you might have home-based or office-based. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail later. Part-time or full-time. Unless it's just a one-off task that you have, I would consider full-time. And then the selection, go through a few different things and be really careful, because you want to find some really awesome staff. And if you take care, you're going to find some outstanding staff to support your business. So what's next? We're going to talk about what to outsource. And funnily enough, people who are new to outsourcing often struggle with this. They say, oh, I love the concept. You know, I'm going to have this support. This is terrific. Oh, what am I going to get them to do? I'll give you some tips on that next.